The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, America. Good morning, world. Good morning, CHD. Welcome. Once again, my name is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy here at Children's Health Defense. Today, we're going to have the amazing Cait Corigan to discuss the grassroots efforts behind the GRACE Act. What was happening in Washington, D.C. in the months before the GRACE Act was coming to be introduced by Congressman Greg Steube out of Florida. The GRACE Act is calling for the religious exemption to vaccination effectively to be restored in all 50 states. We currently have 4 states that outright deny religious exemptions. We have 1 state in West Virginia that is kind of trying to deny the exemptions, but Secretary Kenney seemed to speak up about that. We're going to talk about that in a second. But in all of this happening, these things don't just happen in a vacuum. There was a ton of grassroots work that was going on behind the scenes, and Cait is going to talk to us about that when she comes on. But first, as always, we're going to go over some news. In New York, a remarkable Children's Health Defense win got Sarah Doe back into school with her medical exemption accepted. We have a recorded meeting for you to watch, a Zoom recording on how to get a medical exemption in New York, based off this historic ruling from Sujata Gibson and Chad Davenport, backed by Children's Health Defense. Go to teachersforchoice.substack.com. We got the passcode there. You put that in. You could watch it. If you are from New York, you definitely want to check this one out. I've had people tell me it's the best Zoom they've ever seen on medical freedom in New York. People who don't even have children or children that need exemptions. So there's just some amazing information covered there. Definitely check that out. I'm calling this the New England Syndicate. Check this out. This is a weird one. Health officials from Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania met this week to consider coordinating their own vaccine recommendations separate from the federal government. Children's Health Defense retweeted this. Looks like New Hampshire is living up to their motto, live free or die. I spoke to some of my New England colleagues on this. New Hampshire's got some bad stuff happening in their budget bill. They're trying to sneak in new recommendations as well, too. They just didn't join this greater syndicate. Strange to see Pennsylvania there, a red state, purple state. This is having a big impact. People are talking about, what about the liability shield? The liability shield is federal only from ACIP guidelines. But what if things are changed to shared decision making? That's still on the schedule. What does that do? Maybe the doctors will be liable, but the companies won't be. So much to unpack here. You could bet Big Pharma's attorneys are working on this one. Stay tuned to CHD TV and The Defender. Much, much, much more will be coming on this. Okay, so now let's talk about the GRACE Act. The Right This Wrong covered this in Defender. GRACE Act would strip federal funding from schools that ban religious exemptions. Here at CHD, we actually launched a draft of the bill before it was introduced to garner support, to get groups supporting this bill, and to get co-sponsors. I actually spoke to someone in Representative Massey's office who ended up co-sponsoring this bill because of the efforts, and he learned about it through us pushing this out. We also now have 32 groups that are supporting it over this time since we first launched this action. Now, 20 hours after we launched that action, HHS OCR, that is Office of Civil Rights, released a bombshell tweet. Let's put that tweet up. Today, OCR reminded West Virginia of the laws respecting conscience and religious freedom in health and human services, including laws that require states to recognize their own religious exemptions to compulsory vaccination laws. Boom. Let's show the memo that came out of HHS OCR, obviously with the approval of Secretary Kennedy. Here it is. It went out on August 21st. 2025. And basically, this is saying that West Virginia is in violation of their own state laws and of federal laws by not honoring religious exemptions. You might know that in West Virginia right now, there is an executive order issuing religious exemptions, but there isn't legislation. The legislation got vetoed some year or so ago as this struggle continues for religious rights in West Virginia. But now the federal government is stepping in. And HHS OCR, I've talked to lots of legal experts who told me, Mike, if I was head of HHS OCR, here's some of the stuff that I would do. And this was top of the list of one of the things that would happen. I would be shocked if we did not see these letters roll out next to New York, California, Connecticut, and Maine, the 4 big bad states that deny religious exemptions currently. It's going to be harder to do those than West Virginia. I predict, I don't know, no crystal ball, I predict West Virginia is going to fold to this. They are going to listen to Secretary Kennedy. They're going to change their laws. I don't think they're going to go into a legal battle. But the other 4 states, I don't know. We really don't know what's going to happen. Now, one of those states is Connecticut. And the good senator from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal, came out early anticipating a letter from HHS. Let's show Blumenthal's panic, maybe? Let's show that clip.
I'm here at the Community Health Center in Hartford advocating for people to use vaccines, whether it's measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, polio. They are a potential menace, but they're preventable. And people should simply be aware and have access to vaccines, not only for their own sake, but for all of our health. These vaccines save lives. Connecticut proudly has one of the highest vaccine rates in the United States, 98.2%. We're healthier as a result. And I am advocating more widespread use and against the proposals, apparently under consideration by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, that Connecticut would be penalized for having narrow exemptions to vaccine requirements. Vaccines ought to be encouraged. Education funding should not be held hostage for the anti-vax agenda of a small minority in our population.
Anti-vax agenda of a small minority in our population. So blatant discrimination against a small minority is what Senator Blumenthal is advocating for. Just to give a little bit of a layout here before we bring in our great guest, Cait Corigan. So he said we have narrow vaccine exemptions. You know what that means? We don't care what your religious beliefs are. We don't care if you have sincerely held religious beliefs. That's worth 0 in Connecticut. You get nothing. You got to go against your beliefs. You got to go against your faith, what you found in prayer and meditation, what you believe, and inject yourself with these vaccines if you want to access school. So that's what he's talking about, narrow vaccine exemptions. They have a medical exemption. I don't even know how accessible their medical exemption is in Connecticut or isn't. So that's what he was talking about there. Enough of me. With that, we are now going to bring on Cait Corigan to talk about the GRACE Act and the grassroots efforts that have gone into making this day and getting this bill to launch. Cait, thank you so much for joining us here at Children's Health Defense on CHD TV.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Thanks so much for being here, Cait. Now, I have worked with you for years. I've been in Albany with thousands of people protesting COVID vaccine mandates. I've seen you run for Congress here in New York, but I don't know how much of our audience knows you. Why don't you just lay out for people, who is Cait Corigan? What have you done in medical freedom?
Certainly. Thank you so much again, Michael. I'm a former congressional candidate. I'm from originally Long Island, New York. That's my home state. And back in 2021, I was mandated to get the COVID vaccine as a college student. And I had, submitted a request for religious exemption, which I had for many years, numerous years. And in any event, I was able to overturn that mandate. And that basically, that experience showed me firsthand how deeply vulnerable our rights are when government or institutions place themselves above conscience and faith. And since that time, I helped over 13,000 Americans in 49 states file successful religious exemptions to keep them either in school or continue to keep their job. And this issue matters so much to me personally. And also, as a constitutionalist, I'm a JD candidate. This issue needs to come to the forefront. And I'm just so excited about the time that we're living in, Michael. There's just so many phenomenal things happening across the country. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for reminding me about the COVID fight and the religious. I applied for a religious exemption to a COVID shot as an NYC teacher. It was denied. We're trying to go to the Supreme Court now. So, but there's so many different experiences, so many things that happen. And you applied for a religious exemption for college in New York in 2020. That was okay. But for kids under 18, they have gotten rid of the religious exemption here in New York. And this is why this act, the Grace Act from the great Representative Stubbe from Florida, who just put this up, could possibly restore the religious exemption in all 50 states. Before we get into talking about that, here he is. There's Representative Stubbe. Thank you so much. Before we get into talking about that and all the things that happened, there was a grassroots effort happening in DC that you were leading and that you were a major part of prior to this happening that people really don't know about. So, Cait, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, about how this kind of all unfolded over the past 3 months or so?
Certainly. So there was a group of us advocates, mostly from the state of New York, but from other states that are affected. Like you said, there's 4 states across the country where children no longer have the right to file, or their parents don't have the right to file religious exemptions for them to vaccine mandates to keep them in school. And, this all came about really, the grassroots movement has started a long time ago. I've only been involved in the medical freedom movement a little over 4 years. But there's people who have been working much longer, much harder than I have. But because of the time that we're in right now, by the grace of God, Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. We have Bobby Kennedy as secretary at HHS. We have a majority in the House and the Senate. We have a president who created for the first time ever a Religious Liberty Commission. A group of us went to that commission, the first hearing back in June. And, we were really excited about change that we're seeing, an administration that values and respects religious freedom, that really promotes and wants to defend parental rights. This is vastly different than the last administration we had, where we witnessed a shocking erosion of civil liberties. Parents were surveilled and labeled as domestic terrorists for speaking up at school board meetings. Faith leaders were arrested for holding worship services during lockdowns. We saw liquor stores and casinos all remained open during that time. Pro-life Americans were dragged from the sidelines, from the sidewalks for praying peacefully outside abortion clinics. And now we have an administration in charge. Maha is in charge. MAGA is in charge. And it's very exciting. And so we met with I would say at this point, over 40 offices. Those are congressional offices, Senate offices, people within the Department of Justice, staff members within the HHS, and everyone has been extremely receptive to our message of the fact that in America, no child should be denied an education because of their parents' religious beliefs.
That's fantastic. So while you're meeting, you went to DC a number of times. You had a great group of activists, attorneys, CHD members that were with you, that were having these conversations. And then after a couple of weeks of that, some tweets popped up. We had Charlie Kirk put out a tweet saying we must have religious exemptions in all 50 states. And Candace Owens followed suit saying something very, very similar about what she's seen. And she called out Connecticut, right? The state that she's from. She called out about the repression in Connecticut around religious exemptions. I'm convinced that was directly from your efforts, from the efforts of others with you, because you know how DC is. If people aren't in your office, if it's not coming to you, it just falls down the pipeline. It just goes down. But the staffers, they talk, they're friends, they're hanging out. These situations come. Do you agree with me on that? Do you think that the behind the scenes you were doing actually had the impact of raising to that level of national attention?
So, I mean, we can't say for certain, but I do have to agree that, these conversations that we've had in DC, and we've continued them. We've continued with Zoom calls and consistent communication back and forth with offices that are now aware. I mean, many offices were not aware of this situation that is happening in deep blue, Democrat-controlled states. But I do think now we're seeing so much hope, Michael. We really are, because these offices are actively reaching out for our input in regards to either different legislation or other sort of collaborative work, grassroots work. You can never doubt the impact and how powerful grassroots movements are. And the administration recognizes this. I truly believe that this is the most transparent and accessible administration in history. The congressional and Senate offices have been phenomenal as far as sort of strategizing. We're able to be part of these sort of conversations of how can our federal government best protect and ensure that our protections are validated, and I think that it's just so exciting to be part of this movement. I know you said that I'm the leader in this. There are many other people who are also helping, and I'm so happy.
Well, no, there are many people, absolutely. But I really wanted to shine a spotlight on you because you used all of your connections when you ran for Congress to open these doors and to make this happen. If it wasn't for you, I don't know if we would have been in the spot that we're in right now. And you definitely deserve your flowers for that right now. I want to bring up one other grassroots kind of situation before we actually talk about the act itself. You had a great meeting. A number of people with Representative Stubbe started to talk about this legislation. There was a number of conversations about that. And then a week ago or so, something like that, you came to me and you're like, we can launch this. I was like, what? What do you mean? And you were like, no, they want us to build momentum for it. And that was this great moment that we were able to get an action alert at Children's Health Defense of the draft bill to try to build momentum for it. It's a little unorthodox. It's not the norm. It's not the norm. It's not what you normally do. Some people have told me, well, Representative Stubbe's not an orthodox guy. He knows what he wants to do, and he does it. And so we launched this bill, and I have to say, I mean, 99% of what I've seen since this has been positive, has been building momentum, has been gaining support. What do you think? Do you agree with me on that?
100%. I will say in the conversation that I had with the office when they said that we could go public with the bill, I did ask 3 times to just make sure I heard that correctly, that we could go sort of public and call and have an action alert and ask people to get involved. And I think, that just goes to show how powerful MAHA is, how incredible the collaboration of MAHA and MAGA are. And it's really exciting to be part of that process. Like you said, I did run for Congress. I developed a lot of phenomenal relationships and connections with people on Capitol Hill and people across the country, activists and movements, whether it's in regards to medical freedom, veterans issues and advocacy work. And but it really is a wonderful thing that we were able to let people know. I know a lot of supporters, a lot of followers of mine kept messaging me and asking me, well, Cait, what's happening? What's going on? Because, I really couldn't disclose too much information in regards to, the bill and other work that we're doing with members of the federal government in DC.
Yeah, no, it's excellent, and I believe at this point, we and especially you have been able to amass over 30 groups that are supporting this bill: Children's Health Defense, Moms for Liberty, Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, Veterans for Trump, on and on and on. Maybe you could rattle off a couple of the other supporters that you know too.
Yeah, so Moms for America, we have multiple churches who are also supporting the bill. America First Veterans. It's just incredible because it's people from different patriot groups. Some that maybe do not directly focus or emphasize on issues of medical freedom. We have Latinos for Trump as well. It's really very exciting, and I can't wait for the press release that Congressman Stubbe's office is going to put out on Thursday ahead of the introduction of the GRACE Act, which will list the rest of the organizations. But like you said, we have over 30 groups across the country that are supporting this.
So one of the things I told a lot of people God was on our side with this when this happened, because one of the remarkable things we had no clue about was 20 hours after we had launched the GRACE Act in an action alert to people to call their representatives, to get groups to support it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s HHS OCR, that's the Office of Civil Rights, put out a memo to West Virginia and put them in the hot seat. And that, Lou, why don't we put that memo up actually as well too? That memo from OCR told West Virginia that they are in violation of the Constitution, and they are in violation of their own state laws as well too, because they're not providing a religious exemption to vaccination. And this sort of 1-2 hit that was completely, in my view, it must have been divinely inspired, because the date for the launch of this had shifted. And you know how it goes, Cait. Like, we weren't 100% sure what day, or was it ready? Was the graphics ready? I mean, all of those things. But that sort of 1-2 punch that happened, I think, sent a wave, especially throughout our community, but throughout the nation, about, whoa, religious exemption of vaccination is a national issue. And I anticipate we're going to see growing more a national conversation about this. And any comments you have about this?
For sure. I mean, now is the time. Now is the time. The tide is turning. Donald Trump ran and won on a platform that put families first. He promised to stand up for parental rights, religious freedom, educational choice. And these issues, not just Donald Trump ran on, but members of Congress, members of the Senate. We have such an exciting movement behind us. And I just really want to stress on the fact that, parents who maybe feel that, are concerned because their beliefs are under threat, what can they do? We really want them to not be silent. This is your time. We have an administration that is open and willing to hearing concerns of parents across the country. We have an administration that has a vested interest right now in preserving and protecting religious freedom. Now is the time to act. Now is not the time to be silent. Your stories matter. And for the first time in decades, multiple people within the federal government are not only listening to these concerns, but they're inviting us into the conversation. They're inviting us into the strategy, into how conversations of how they can best represent us, represent our movement, and represent the issues that are impacting Americans across the country that for far too long have been silenced, have been pushed aside. We've had so many things against us with big tech, with the media. Now is the time for everyone to speak up, to reach out to your representatives, to make your voice heard, because these doors are wide open for us right now. And we're not sure what the future holds. We don't. But we want to take this opportunity and take every opportunity that's given to us right now. And we're given lots of opportunities, and it's just going to be an amazing 3.5 years.
Yeah, it certainly is. It is a remarkable time. I just remember, I've been doing this for a little bit, and I just remember being stomped on and just loss after loss after loss. And like, that's not the case anymore. And listen, we're not going to win everything. And, sometimes you step up to bat and you strike out, but we keep stepping up, and we're not striking out that much nowadays. We're actually, there's a lot of really great things happening. So speaking of that, let's talk about what the Grace Act actually does compared to what people might think it does. Just lay that out briefly. What does the Grace Act do if it becomes law?
Definitely. So basically, for states that do not, or schools that do not provide religious accommodations for vaccine mandates for school age children, would lose their federal funding. It's a very simple, straightforward act. I know there's been some questions and concerns from people within our medical freedom community and our movement. That being said, bills. Traditionally, most bills, once they're introduced to legislation, they change. The language change, other things are added. There's always room for making adjustments. And but honestly, it's very exciting to see how simple, clean, and straightforward this bill is, which is very similar to other bills that Congressman Stubbe has introduced into Congress.
Right. So the Grace Act doesn't necessarily bring back the religious exemption to all 50 states. It says you don't have to have a religious exemption, but the federal government can't provide funds to you if you decide to deny that because it's against the Constitution. And it's also against RFRA. There's a specific federal law that makes it illegal for the federal government to give funds to a state that is engaged in religious discrimination. So, and there are some people saying we should narrow the scope of the funds and do other things. But right now is the time for momentum. Right now is the time to get this out. That can all be worked out in the amendment process. So, what else do you think we need to talk to our audience about right now? You just laid out this whole. I mean, so much energy coming from you. You're really positive about what's happening now. Obviously, Children's Health Defense goal is to end all mandates, right? This bill is a step in that direction to give access to people that which others have, that now some 14 million children are denied when you look at the states and the populations of children there. What do you think is next? What do you think we need to do? And what do you think we need to do as a movement to unite and to move forward on all these issues?
Yes, well, I really like what you just said, Michael, is I think collectively, most people, right, within the medical freedom movement, I think maybe I could even say all of us, are against mandates. And that includes me as well. That includes, I think, everybody who's been sort of on our leading action on this issue, is that we all find that mandates are unconstitutional. And in America, a country that was founded on religious freedom, that was founded on freedom, generally speaking, that we shouldn't have mandates. But like you said, this is an incredible first step. And our work does not end here. Our work does not end once Congressman Stubbe introduces this bill on the 29th. We have multiple steps in progress right now. We're working with many other congressional offices. We're working with, like I said, we've had meetings with the Department of Justice, meetings with HHS. Our work does not stop here. It's really just going to rile up. And we have a lot more work that we want to do. We have other bills that we want introduced. We want other sort of requests that we have made to the federal government is giving us a voice. We have requested congressional hearings and briefings. We've also requested other sort of intervention as far as letters to different agencies. So, there's a long list of different requests that we have made. And I think that right now, the audience listening today, we need your voice in this, because we can't do this alone. We're so much stronger together. And so if you can call your representatives, It doesn't matter what state you live in, even if you live in a state that has a religious exemption. Please, reach out to your representatives. Let them know that you are asking your member of Congress to become an original co-sponsor of the Grace Act. And in order to do so, they need to sign on by the 29th. So that's the first call to action. And then just obviously stay involved. Keep being updated and looking out for other sort of updates from people from me on my social media account, from CHD, who is a big supporter of thank goodness, of the Grace Act, which we're really grateful for. But this fight, every person, it doesn't matter if you're just one person, your voice matters, and you guys need to speak up.
Fantastic. Cait Corigan, God bless you and all the work you've done. I'm just so glad that we have your youthful energy in this movement, that you're going to law school. You're going to be a powerful attorney in this space. Thank God for all of those who are younger than me that are carrying this torch, because there's so many others that did it for me, that were fighting for medical freedom before I knew I needed to fight for medical freedom, right? And just to know that the torch is being passed to someone as just excellent and capable as you. Thank you so much. God bless you so much. We'll have you on the show again sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Fantastic. All right. So as Cait said, there still is time for your representative to be an original sponsor of the Grace Act. I was actually in touch with the health policy lead in Representative Massey's office recently, and after that, Massey got on as an original sponsor to the Grace Act. The action is below in the show notes here. You could click on the action alert and it can help take you through getting to your representative. But please learn who your representative is. Save their phone number, their local phone number, their DC phone number. Be in touch with them. Develop that relationship so they know that these issues matter to you. And with that, coming up, we have, as every Tuesday after me now, the wonderful, the legendary, the amazing Dr. Meryl Nass.
Good morning. It's so nice to follow Michael every time. He's so full of enthusiasm, and he is amazing himself. Really glad to be back. What I wanted to do is give everybody updates on the two riders that I've spoken about before. One is the sludge rider that was tucked into the appropriations bill, and the other was the pesticide liability shield rider that was tucked into that same bill. And then when I'm finished talking about that, I want to talk about a letter that the Department of Health and Human Services sent to the boards of education in West Virginia. And finally, I want to finish up with some of the things that Secretary Kennedy's HHS has been doing that have not gotten a lot of attention, because many of us, have been disappointed that things have gone slowly and not much is happening. But actually, there's a tremendous amount happening right now, and you're not going to hear it from the mainstream media, so I wanted you to hear it from me. All right. The pesticide liability shield, let me start with that. The most important thing to know about that, it's a bill, basically. It's a very short bill, a 1-paragraph long bill that was tucked into the Environment and Interior Appropriations Bill. And it's written in such a way that it's confusing as to what it really means. But what it means, of course, is that you cannot, that it restricts the EPA from using any method other than a very complicated multi-year method to change labels on pesticides. And it means that basically all the pesticide labels will be frozen in place until multi-year reviews have happened. These reviews in the past have only been required to occur every 15 years, but they occur less often than that, or they're not completed. So the glyphosate review that was finalized last was in 1993. 32 years ago. And it would freeze that in place so no new warnings could be added until at least a 4-year process has gone by. And with staff being cut at the EPA, goodness knows when these processes, these very thorough reviews will finally be completed. Now, so, and Bayer has aligned hundreds of other pesticide companies with it to fight for this, because all of them will get a liability shield. Remember that the liability shield is something that was only given by Congress to childhood vaccines up on, in 1986. And then in 2005, it was given to experimental drugs and vaccines that were being used for emergencies, such as pandemics or biological warfare. And those are supposed to be the only liability shields Congress has allowed to be issued. It's questionable, given our Constitution, whether Congress even had the right to do that, but they did, and they haven't been successfully challenged so far. So giving a de facto means, in fact, that's what is happening, even though the language in the bill doesn't say they're getting a liability shield. De facto, they are, all the pesticide companies, if this bill goes through. It was passed by voice vote by the full House committee, and the Democrats did not challenge them. That's a problem. The Democrats either want to use this against the Republicans, or the Democrats were probably given some benefits as well as the Republicans to pass it. And the reason I say that is because Bayer has said publicly that they have a $17 billion war chest to deal with their own liability for glyphosate and other products. And that money could be used for paying off claims, or it could be used for fighting in the courts and getting a bill passed. Now, the other important thing to note about this is that the head of Representative Simpson, who is the head of the subcommittee that dealt with this pesticide liability shield, brazenly lied about it to his fellow colleagues. And apparently that lie was spread widely in Congress because many constituents of many representatives of the House were told when they called their representative's office that there was no pesticide liability shield, that all we were dealing with was trying to make all the pesticide rules equivalent throughout the country, because right now California has more restrictive rules than anybody else on chemicals and carcinogenicity. And so the claim was that this bill would get rid of that. Well, that's not the truth. And so you should be very angry that people are being lied to, but there's a lot at stake. Bayer has already had to spend $11 billion to pay claims from 67,000 people that it has settled with. And Bayer spent over more than $60 billion to buy Monsanto, at which point it took on all this liability. Monsanto must have been very happy. Bayer is unhappy. Okay, so it has not gone to the full House. And very interestingly, that rider is not in the Senate bill. So it was not approved at the level of the Senate. What happens when that is the case is that the leadership of the committee and the leadership of the House and the Senate get together and decide how to harmonize the House and Senate versions of the bill. And so we want them to harmonize it by removing the pesticide waiver. I am told that the White House wants to get rid of this pesticide waiver as well. They don't like it, but we need your support. We need the citizens to call and say, this is not okay. They don't like being lied to about what it means. And it's bad enough that we have a liability shield for vaccines and pandemic drugs. And look what that did during COVID. It allowed a very dangerous set of vaccines to be given with no liability, and people have no real means to get compensated for serious injuries. We don't want that to happen to pesticides or anything else. So it's important, if you could please, everybody should have the phone number of their senators their two senators, their representative, and then their local representative and senator in their state should have those numbers on speed dial and just call and leave a message. It really matters. It's much more important if you call. It counts more than if you just sign a petition, which is why I'm asking you to do this. All right, now, the sludge rider is a slightly different story. That was also snuck into the same bill, the appropriations bill for environment and the Interior Department at the last minute. And it is in both, what did pass. So it is in the House and Senate versions of the bill. So both the House and Senate will be voting, the full House and full Senate. It's only been passed by committees so far. They will be voting on this. And this also uses tricky language to get what it wants. Now, what's been happening for over 30 years is that the EPA made a terrible decision in the 90s that, boy, we could save a lot of money and we could create a new industry if municipalities didn't have to deal with their own wastes. And we could spread them on land. We could spread them on farms, in forests, on schoolyards, the whole, anywhere. If we spread them on the land, we could, because they have nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus, we can call it fertilizer, and we can just ignore all of the toxic materials that are in sludge. Okay, so what is sludge? Sludge is everything you flush down a toilet, everything that goes down your sink to a sewage treatment center. So if you don't have a septic system, particularly if you're in a city, you have your wastes and industrial wastes, which contain these forever chemicals called PFAS, which are endocrine disruptors, probably carcinogenic, at least some of them. There are thousands of them, and can cause other neurologic and other health problems. These are also being flushed down the drain, as well as many other toxic products. And when they get to a waste treatment center, not much happens to them. We discussed this a couple of weeks ago on this show with Laura Orlando. Basically, they get swirled around, big particulates get removed. The liquid gets separated from the solid. The liquid is then thrown into the ocean or the river, and downstream you may be drinking it. And the solid then is renamed biosolids in some cases, or liquefied again and sprayed on fields and other things. So 56% of this sewage sludge, which has been barely treated, it's been treated to kill most bacteria, most viruses, but that's about it. It is then, some of it is discarded into landfills, but much of it is discarded on farms. And this has made some farms unusable. So here in Maine, there are a number of farms where very, very high levels of PFAS were measured in the soil. It was there for 25 or 30 years. It didn't dissipate, and the farmers had to stop farming. Now, in Maine, the government is trying to start compensating some of these farmers. Right now, there is no method of remediation. And Connecticut and Maine have stopped the spraying of biosolids or sewage sludge, whichever name they choose to use, on farmland. But in the rest of the 48 states, this procedure is likely still occurring. And so it's a way to get forever chemicals into your food, and particularly into your fatty foods, your milk, your cheese, your cream, the cows that eat hay or straw from land that has been sprayed with this stuff may have very high levels. So there may be very high levels in the milk. Most states are not looking for, it's a problem for which there's no solution right now. Okay, we don't know how to get rid of it. We know how to stop making it worse. But most states don't want to deal with it because it's too complicated, it's too expensive. And the companies that carry around the sludge, that spray it, that are involved with it, have a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they have been able to lobby Congress to get this bill rider, which let me go back and tell you what the bill rider. The bill rider says that after doing this for over 30 years, the EPA finally issued a draft report on January 15th, a week before Biden left office, pointing out some of the problems with the use of sludge on farmland and other things, because there's also runoff into our water supplies, into groundwater, into aquifers. You know, the idea of pouring toxic chemicals down the drain and then just spraying them randomly, you know, is such a terrible idea. You wonder how anyone could possibly have thought of it and then protected it for 30 years. In any event, what the writer says is that even though there's a draft report from EPA, and normally when that happens, you're getting ready to do some regulation and to limit the problems that the draft report has called attention to, this writer says no money at all can be spent to finalize the draft or to make any policy based on the draft. So it's a way of deep sixing. It is a way of burying this report so that no one will be able to do anything for a long time about this procedure of pouring toxic sewage sludge on farmland and other land and letting it get into the water supplies. Everybody should be horrified by this. I had no idea that in my town, the river water that I'm drinking, you know, is contaminated by sewage, sludge, liquids that are coming downstream. I'm at the bottom, but, you know, my town is near the ocean. So it's coming from a ways downstream from other sewage treatment plants. And many of us in the United States are dealing with that too. And you didn't know it. You are drinking, you know, urine and stool and everything else, you know, solvents, PFAS, anything that can be poured down the drain. Some of it you are drinking if you're drinking water from rivers, and often from aquifers too, often from reservoirs. All right, so that is Section 507, and you should call your representative and be appropriately upset about that rider. All right, now let's talk about some of the really good things that have happened at HHS in the last week. So the Department of Health and Human Services has their own Office of Civil Rights. So the Justice Department has that also, but HHS has it. And as many of us know, there are 5 states in the United States currently that do not offer a religious or a philosophic exemption to vaccines. And how did that happen? It's been a long process. West Virginia is one of the oldest that has not offered religious or philosophic exemptions for many, many decades, close to 90 or 100 years. However, the law in the United States regarding whether people have the right to a religious exemption or a philosophic exemption is contradictory. There are many laws. So there are laws that say in some states that you cannot have such an exemption, but there are also federal and state laws that demand that people's moral beliefs as well as their religious beliefs be respected, including in the First Amendment, right, where the government can make no law to limit freedom of religion. Well, what the Department of Health and Human Services did this week was to go to West Virginia regarding the issue that boards of education in West Virginia have refused to give students religious or philosophic exemptions to vaccines. They say every child has to have whatever vaccines the state demands, or they cannot attend school. And this has been, in the past, this has involved every student, students in preschools that are regulated by the state government, as well as public schools, private schools, and I believe even colleges. So let me explain what this letter means, because I've had to read it about 4 times, and most people who have discussed it with me did not understand it. What it says is that we in the Office of Civil Rights at HHS are responsible for enforcing 26 different conscience statutes, that's federally, as well as 21 religious non-discrimination provisions in other federal statutes and regulations. And these include a number of grant programs. So what they're saying is we have extensive federal law, 26 conscience statutes and 21 religious statutes, and they are tied up with federal funding to states. And the range of subjects that these statutes relate to include vaccinations and compulsory health services. And one of these conscience statutes, so we're not only talking religious, but we're talking conscience or personal belief exemptions. One of these conscience statutes involves the Vaccines for Children program, which came in during the Clinton administration, and it is a program that federal funding that pays for the vaccines for over 50% of American children. So if you are on Medicaid, if you are a tribal child, if you do not have health insurance, or if you meet some other requirements, the federal government will pay for all your vaccinations. And so 50 to 60% of American children get their vaccinations through this program. It's a multi-billion-dollar program every year. Now, providers who participate have to comply with these statutes that are being cited. And the letter says, look, Medicaid also requires you to obey these statutes, and therefore we can threaten you that if you do not offer religious and philosophic personal belief exemptions to your students, we can withhold your Medicaid benefits for the state, which amounts to $1.37 billion. And presumably they can also withhold the Vaccines for Children funding, which means that none of the 50% to 70% of children in West Virginia whose vaccines are paid for by the feds, none of them potentially could get vaccinated. So they are wielding a big stick, but it's a threat saying, you know, maybe you want to rethink the fact that you're not going along with offering exemptions to vaccination. And they point out that the governor of West Virginia issued an executive order in January saying that there should be exemptions, both exemptions to vaccination, that the court in West Virginia agreed with his interpretation, and that there is law from 2023 in West Virginia called EPRA, which, let me think what, which compels the government of West Virginia to offer exemptions. So what's happened is the schools, which, you know, they've been used to this for almost 100 years of just forcing everybody to get every vaccine. They're now being told not to do that, and they've been encouraged to fight back. But the letter says, look, we have a lot of federal laws in our favor. We have state laws in our favor. We have an executive order from your own governor, and we have a a judge who has said that the executive order is correct. And therefore, we have a very strong case that you must offer these exemptions or face the consequences. Now, you know that this will have to go to the courts again. If the boards of education or the local health departments do not give in, there will be a legal case. And I think that West Virginia was chosen as the first state for HHS to attempt to heavy them, even though these 21 religious statutes and 26 personal belief statutes would be applicable in any state. So we've got 4 other states. We've got Connecticut, Maine, New York, and California that also don't offer religious or personal belief exemptions. And so the Office of Civil Rights could go to those states as well, but they have a very solid way to start in West Virginia because they've got the governor on their side. They have the House in the state assembly on their side, and they've already got one judicial decision in West Virginia on their side. So I think that West Virginia is the best state to start with. This will probably go to the courts and be resolved relatively quickly. And then the other 4 states that are withholding these exemptions will have to decide whether their legislatures want to give in, or perhaps their governors can issue an executive order, or whether they want to challenge HHS and see whether funding can be withheld. I mean, withholding funding for Medicaid programs is huge. No state can afford to have that kind of money withheld. So we will see what happens, but I am very hopeful that this is going to be the end of enforced mandates for everybody, and that we will get back the religious and philosophic exemptions to vaccination throughout the United States. All right. Finally, I just wanted to say that in addition, Secretary Kennedy has been pushing the states and has been successful. There have been a lot of bills passed or in process to stop allowing children to bring cell phones to school. We want to get rid of that. It's not good for them. It's not good for them physiologically. They don't need to have that phone next to their head. But it's also not good in terms of their learning. So that's important. He has worked with a number of states on SNAP waivers. So the federal government, actually through USDA, but through Secretary Kennedy's urging as well, pays for 16 nutrition programs, and the biggest one is SNAP, which used to be known as food stamps. That program has spent up to well over $100 billion a year for food stamps for Americans. And currently it's costing every American in taxes about $500 a year. So it's a very expensive program, but it does give about 40 million Americans a leg up as far as buying food. Now, we want those Americans to buy healthy food. And unfortunately, in many states, the food stamp money has allowed them to buy candy. And in every state, it's allowed, it can be spent on sweet soda and drinks. And it turns out that about 10% is spent on soda, which is, empty calories, bad for you, contributing to diabetes. And we have an epidemic of diabetes in the United States. So strong efforts are being made to limit the SNAP funds so that they cannot be used for candy or soda. While at the same time, if you use SNAP funds to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and that can be at a health food store, at a grocery store, at a farmer's market, most states are offering a twofer. So you can actually buy fresh fruits and vegetables at these places and have your food stamps work double. So you can buy $10 worth of fruits and vegetables and only pay $5 in food stamps through these programs. And so we are hoping that these will be expanded, and they have different names in every state, so I can't give you the names, but look for them. If you have food stamps, it's a very valuable program and will aid in your health. The school lunches also are to be worked on. The USDA and FDA jointly come up with the food plan, figuring out what is healthy food for Americans. And then the school lunches are based on that. So the school lunches will be improving in terms of health, and I want you all to be aware of that. Finally, the COVID vaccines are being reevaluated by the new Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at the CDC. There is a work group led by Professor Retzef Levy of MIT. He is excellent, brilliant, He really cares about this, and we will find out exactly what's going on. The hiding of the data is going to end, and we will solve the problem of the COVID vaccines. I should mention that yesterday also a vaccine that never should have been licensed for chikungunya, which we don't even have in the United States, but you can get it if you travel. It's a rare condition. Very, very few Americans have gotten it. That vaccine was taken off the market yesterday because now FDA is applying stricter standards. So things are moving. It may not be moving as fast as we want it to, but things are getting better. Bear with us. I will tell you more next week about the rollout of our Door to Freedom campaign, Save Our Food and Farmers. And thank you so much for listening. Put those representatives and senators on speed dial, and I will see you next week.
We're live. Can you tell everyone your name, please?
My name is Dr. Irene Mavrakakis, and I'm crying.
Why are you crying?
Because I was vaccine injured in 2012. But, Polly, you should know that there's this doctor who had a Twitter handle called Anaphylaxis Fact, who found you years ago when I was afraid to speak out, when I was really sick. I was very sick for 8 years from my vaccine injury. And I used to watch you on Twitter and things like that. And I said, someday I'm gonna go meet Polly and I'm gonna tell her my story, but I'm also gonna be Dr. Mavrakakis and research everything and be able to also tell you some things that I found while trying to heal and spending all my time researching because I didn't have anything else to do. I did work and I did raise kids, but I was really sick after my vaccine injury.
So which vaccine hurt you?
It was one of the flu vaccines. So I'm a physician at a hospital, and they were already starting to mandate flu vaccines in 2012 or highly recommend them, and you had to fill out a form. And I was a little bit aware of some vaccine stuff. Always make sure my kids didn't get the one with the preservative. Had heard some stories from some military members about the anthrax vaccine and things like that. And, you know, I knew that the hospitals had quality measurement payments tied to flu vaccination status, and that was the driving force to wanting these flu vaccines, which also ties into COVID mania. So they were going to the different offices and offering the flu vaccine, and the nurse didn't ask me my allergies. And the thing is that I'm allergic to latex, and that allergy came from the low quality gloves during the AIDS epidemic. I trained at St. Vincent's Hospital, Manhattan during the height of the AIDS epidemic, so it's full circle for me because I know about the hepatitis B vaccine that was contaminated by simian 40 and all of that. Anyway, after the vaccine, somehow allergies came up, and I jokingly said, well, not as if vaccines have latex in them, and she's like, well, this one does. And so
why would it have latex in the
there is a file, CDC PDF file, which vaccines have latex in them. It's in the stopper, so it's equivalent to sticking a needle through a peanut and injecting it to a peanut allergic kid, you see. So knowing as a board certified anesthesiologist and an interventional pain specialist and knowing the biochemistry of it all, I know that that was probably a really terrible idea, and it turned out to be a horrible idea because that night I was choking. I didn't even recognize anaphylaxis because I hadn't had it in so long. The last time I had anaphylaxis was 4 years old. And I literally became airborne anaphylactic to latex like the peanut allergy kid.
Wow.
So what happened is because latex cross-reacts with a lot of foods, I didn't realize that I was having a lot of recurrent anaphylaxis to foods. So by the time I wound up in a pediatric latex allergy specialist in Hopkins, I was on 120 milligrams of prednisone, Benadryl, 50 milligrams Q4, Zyrtec, Singular, you know, insurance saying you can't have any more EpiPens, frequent flyer in the ER at my hospital. Like, I was a disaster. Sometimes I'd go home for lunch and not come back because I wound up in the ER, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And the allergists at Hopkins and the local allergists, did IgE or allergy testing to see if I was cross-reacting to foods, because latex people cross-react with kiwi, walnut, avocado, banana, and then as you become more allergic, you start to cross-react with these foods. It has to do with the genetic structure. This is really important because I want to kind of get a peanut dig into this. We'll explain the origins of anaphylactic food allergies are related to the fact that there are legume oil and milk protein vaccine adjuvants and excipients. I found a book by Hagen and Edelman that lists the current vaccine adjuvants and excipients, and there's legume oil currently used in the United States. And of course, that's the reason why we have the peanut allergy crisis, as vaccines have quadrupled since 1986 when they removed product liability for vaccines. So it's full circle for me. So I went down a deep dive onto what's in adjuvants and excipients, mechanism of immunology, and spent 10 years researching it all while trying to get better. And so the pediatric allergist said that, pretty much you cannot be on 120 milligrams of prednisone for 3 months. You're going to die soon. This is ridiculous. And he put me on this medicine. And this medicine is very important because it will help COVID and flu vaccinated patients who have a histamine component of their cytokine storm. This is very important, and I'll tell you the 2 articles that lead to the research that I'm doing or trying to do at my hospital. Gastrochrome is the medicine. Gastrochrome is used for mast cell disease. It's a mast cell stabilizer. 60% of your mast cells live in your stomach. It's a liquid medicine. It prevents your mast cells from releasing histamine. Histamine is a component of the cytokine storm. We currently use histamine blockers. It's the after side of it. So this medicine stopped the recurrent anaphylaxis. I stayed on that for a couple of years. And then when my IgE testing came back, they did blood because it was too risky to do skin testing. I was IgE positive to all food except for 20. And he literally gave me this list of 20 foods. It was like meat, eggs, different types of meat, no fruit, and peas. So by blood testing, I was IgE positive to these foods. And he said, you are only allowed to eat these 20 foods so I can get you off the medicines and you're going to go on Gastrochrome. And so we did, and I stayed on Gastrochrome. And then I started to reintroduce foods. And then I made sure my food sources were very important, related to organic, non-GMO, healing my leaky gut, terrain-based medicine, path to health and wellness, holistic. I'm an MD, but I hang out with naturopaths, chiropractors, and the like. I'm very open to all the alternative types of medicine. And so fast forward to today, I take no medicines, and I have 95% of my foods back. I got peanut back a couple of years ago. It's a very long pathway, and my specific injury is specific to my allergy tendency. And so people should be hopeful. Of course, my vaccine wasn't messenger RNA. And so as a physician, when this all started, I told people in April of 2020 that there was going to be a vaccine that they were going to force upon us, because I had already seen the patent for the vaccine and the virus. I saw the 2019 donation from the National Institute of Health, or not donation, to Graphex, a vaccine company, to work on an mRNA coronavirus vaccine. And I knew. And so it was a very difficult time. I spoke out a little bit, found a community of doctors in Delaware. We formed the Delaware Initiative for Science and Ethics. We did present to the Department of Public Health and tried to tell them. We, connected with other doctors. Ivermectin is safe and effective. Respiratory virus vaccination doesn't make sense. And so the things that I think on the medical side of things that people need to know are the 2 studies and the theory behind it. It makes absolute no sense to vaccinate for respiratory viruses because they mutate. There's no evidence that flu vaccination decreases morbidity and mortality. There's a study from 2019 by the National Institute of Health and the Department of Defense that shows on table 5 that flu vaccination increases coronavirus susceptibility by 36%. So what does that mean? It means a lot, because in the beginning of COVID mania tyranny, the people who tested positive for COVID were military nursing home people and healthcare workers who are heavily flu vaccinated. The two states that did the worst are New York and California, also heavily flu vaccinated because they passed those draconian anti-medical freedom laws that removed medical and religious exemptions. And they were also the two states that made ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and zinc unavailable. So that was the perfect storm. You know, we all know that PCR testing is invalid as it relates to the diagnosis of clinical disease. And we all know that they should have promoted vitamin D, quercetin, vitamin C in health and wellness. We never do vaccinate during a respiratory virus pandemic for an experimental messenger RNA biologic that literally makes us spike protein making machines. It doesn't even make sense, any of it. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is science and knowledge. And the second component of this is there's an article from the British Journal of Medicine. It's called Flu Vaccine Causes Dengue-like Illness. And they found that in the flu vaccinated patients, they are inadvertently making IgE to the flu viral antigen. Just like in bee stings, some people become allergic because you're not supposed to have respiratory viral antigens injected into you. That genetic structure is a respiratory pathway, so the science doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, our bodies inadvertently make IgE. And likely, in the beginning, the heavily flu vaccinated, right, had IgE to the COVID antigen. Okay, so a component of the cytokine storm is histamine related. So Dr. Chetty in South Africa has found that there's a histamine component of the cytokine storm in the vaccinated, right? And so I have a clinical research at my local hospital to give, which it hasn't had IRB approval, gastrochrome and histamine blockers to vaccinated people in the cytokine storm that have a histamine component. I'm working on it. So what's the answer for me as a libertarian? You know, we need to repeal HR 5546, the law that removed product liability, and the PrEP Act. Why? Well, because that's quintessential government interference. It removed competitive forces in the biologic and vaccine market. That set the stage for COVID mania tyranny, as you know, based on Aaron Series' testimony at the Arizona State Senate. In America, we have competitive forces that drive safety and efficacy. So the issue with what happened is related to the fact that COVID mania tyranny is a quintessential example of the issues with our constitutional republic at large, failed central planning, having a few experts making determinations, and lack of freedom in healthcare and medicine. So that's my space. My space is for people to understand that, for people to know that we need to be for the people, by the people, that we're conscious sovereign beings and we have the right to say what we want to put in our body, and that this was a warning sign of the bigger problems in our constitutional republic. So that's why I came here.
Thank you for coming and thank you for that. I need to ask you a couple of questions. Number one, do you think shedding is real?
From the vax?
COVID shots.
Well, they're not vax, right? The biologics. I read the documents that in the studies that said that women and men recently vaccinated need to be careful of being close to each other if the woman is pregnant. And they didn't use the term shedding, but they did say that there was a time period after vaccination that there was an issue. But they didn't use the word shedding, so it's not my area of expertise.
I just wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah.
The people are reporting it big time.
It's possible. I mean, so we need to let's talk about the reality of the situation. Okay. They told you to not get that spike protein, to wear a face diaper that doesn't work, to stay in your house and not hug grandma. That is complete nonsense, because viruses don't survive outside the human body. So that they can literally inject messenger ribonucleic acid into your body that goes into your ribosomes, that gets translated and transcribed so that you literally are a spike protein producing machine. That's stupid. There's no science related to it. The COVID mania tyranny has nothing to do with a basic science of respiratory viruses. The issue is that we need separation of science and state, just like church and state. The issue is lack of freedom. The issue is regulatory capture in the public health sector. The issue is that the CDC is funded by the CDC Foundation, which is funded by the pharmaceutical industry. The issue is the same goes for the World Health Organization. And the end game, we all know. is the World Health Organization International Health Resolution that they're looking to pass the amendments in May of 2024, which is literally the pathway to a totalitarian medical technocracy. So what we need to do is speak the truth and look at real science and support each other, I think.
Yeah, and everyone needs to share this interview, definitely. Is there anything else you want to tell the people?
I also want to tell people that I couldn't do any of this without God and Jesus, and I had a come into Jesus moment in April of 2020, and the only reason that I'm able to do this is because of that, and my family and friends. And thank you, Polly.
Amen, sister.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you. Thank you for sitting there and doing it. It takes a lot to come and sit there and do that. And you can feel the emotion around this bus.
Yeah.
It's charged with it.
I can't believe I'm actually sitting here. Did I do okay?
You did great. Wait, hang on, let me turn it off.
That's okay. They can hear that.
History doesn't wait. This is our moment to rise, unite, and reclaim our children's health.
Join us here in Austin, Texas this November at the Children's Health Defense Conference.
In the wake of unprecedented medical overreach and censorship, the world is waking up, and people like you are leading the way.
We're at a turning point in history. With the pandemic behind us, our fight for freedom and health has reached the global stage.
This is our moment of truth, and we're ready to seize it together.
And Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of this charge. Our 2025 conference brings together the leaders, visionaries, and warriors who made it happen.
Meet the parents whose lives were forever changed, and hear from doctors who risked everything to speak out. Stand with those who refused to be silenced.
You are going to hear from world-renowned speakers, doctors, and frontline leaders driving the medical freedom movement.
Discover real-world solutions grounded in science, integrity, and human rights.
Join the discussion to talk about vaccines, informed consent, parental rights, and so much more.
And you'll of course hear from your favorite CHD personalities, sharing the latest on CHD's research, litigation, and outreach.
And while you're there, soak up the energy, culture, and music of beautiful Austin, Texas.
Whether you're a parent, a practitioner, or a medical freedom advocate, this is your call to action to protect what matters most.
Be part of the movement that is rewriting the story for generations to come.
So please join us.
Join us.
Join us. Let's make history together in Austin.